This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. I'm your host, Jim Cuddy. On today's show, this week we advocate for working men and women and inspiration for generations of progressives. First, we speak with another legend, Pete Seeger, the most honored and revered folk singer of our time, who reminisces about his years as friend and musical colleague of Woody Guthrie. And we also talk with Fred Harris, a political science professor who once represented Oklahoma, the home of Woody Guthrie, in the United States Senate. Fred talks about Woody's legacy and about the effects of the Dust Bowl, which still resonate in the politics of the state and states where the Okies moved. And Bill Press talks with Sister Simone Campbell, Executive Director of Network, a Catholic social justice lobby, and the leading force behind this summer's Nuns on a Bus tour that campaigned against what they call an immoral Republican budget. Are you tired of Tea Party Republicans and Rush Limbaugh dominating the airwaves? Do you want the facts you won't get on Fox or even on CNN? Then stay tuned. Our sponsor, 21st Century Democrats, works hard to get everyday Democrats involved in returning our party to its roots and to success at the ballot box. Sit back and listen, and then stand up and fight. And follow 21st Century Democrats on Facebook for all the latest progressive news. We're glad you can join us.
This land is your land, and this land is my land, from the California to the New York Island.
Our first guest today is a truly great American, perhaps the leading progressive icon of our times, Pete Seeger. In honor of the centennial of the birth of Woody Guthrie, Pete has some fun telling stories on Woody and revealing the history of the anthem, This Land Is Your Land.
That endless skyway, saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me.
What are your thoughts about the man and his music?
He was an extraordinarily creative writer, thinker, humorist, and cartoonist. He kept a little notebook in his back pocket, and hardly not a day of his life passed without him writing down something in it. And now books are coming out with these things. He was he read widely, although he came from a small town in Oklahoma and had nothing but the local school education. There were teachers in those schools who realized what a remarkable young man they had. And in both the primary school and the high school, there were teachers who took him under their wing and just kept feeding him books. When he met me, we'd only been working together, or I was tagging along after him, rather, for a few months. I visited a friend who had a copy of the French writer Rabelais, and Woody was curious, picked it up, and said, "Can I borrow this?" And during the next 2 or 3 days, he read right through this translation of the French writer. And during the next few weeks, I could see him borrowing some of Rabelais' writing habits, like piling on adjective after adjective after adjective. Woody and I both considered ourselves communists in those days, not in the tight sense of we would take an assignment and infiltrate some organization with an assumed name, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But I was, whereas some people used to sing up in the mountains north of New York City, what they call the Jewish Alps, and we had, the Borscht Circuit, that's what they called it, the Borscht Circuit. And we had what we call the subway circuit, I guess. but we'd go up to Bronx or some other place and sing for a house party. One of the main ways that communists raise money was for people to invite people to their house and charge them a few dollars, and end up giving $50 or $100 to the party. It seemed to us a very democratic kind of organization. However, later on, when Stalin had a series of people who'd confessed to some crime, and they were executed. There was a whole string of people, and these were obviously tortured confessions. And a few years later, Khrushchev, 1956, said, Comrade Stalin was a very strong leader and helped us win the war against Hitler, but he was also very cruel, and he sent people away to Siberia without giving them any chance to defend themselves. Not thousands, not tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands, but millions. There was an absolute dead silence. This speech was made to 5,000 members of the Communist Party that got together every 5 years to see what's the new line they were supposed to parrot. And somebody shouted, "Why didn't you speak up?" And now Khrushchev's entire demeanor changed. Instead of being a rather normal tone of voice, he now shouted, "Who said that?" And now there was dead silence. And Khrushchev said in a normal voice again, "Now you see why I did not speak up."
Tell us a little bit, if you would, Pete, about when...
After Khrushchev, let me tell you, after Khrushchev's speech, communist parties all over the world just dropped to 10% of their former membership. There had been about 100,000 members of the Communist Party here, and after that speech, there were about 10,000.
How about that? Tell us a little bit about when Woody was committed to a hospital after he was diagnosed with Huntington's disease.
Well, he was allowed to come home on weekends the first year or so, if they thought he wasn't going to have a dizzy spell and do crazy things. And once when he came home, little Arlo Guthrie was 7 years old, and he said, "Arlo, they're singing my song, 'This Land Is Your Land,' but they didn't put in the record all the verses." And he made Arlo write down, little Arlo at age 7, wrote down the left-wing type verses. In one bright sunny morning, by the shadow of the steeple, by the relief office, I saw my people. As they stood there hungry, I stood there whistling. This land was made for you and me. And then right after that, these two verses, incidentally, I sang at Obama's inauguration. The next verse says, "Was a great high wall there that tried to stop me. Was a great big sign there said private property. But on the other side, it didn't say nothing. That side was made for you and me."
Let me ask you, Pete, if Woody Guthrie were alive today at 100 years of age, do you think he'd be optimistic about America, pessimistic, or just plain disappointed?
He'd be cracking jokes all the time, I think. Yes, I'm sure he would.
Would you say there are any current, or are there any current American musicians besides yourself who are following in Woody Guthrie's tradition?
Oh, there's not dozens, there's hundreds, because there's people reading Woody's songs in books and listening to them on records and say, I want to do something like you might say Bob Dylan was one of them.
Sure.
And no two are alike, but they did learn from Woody, right?
Oh, yeah.
And don't be afraid. Oh, here's the kind of thing Woody would say. to a bunch of other songwriters, they were all trying to write funny verses for some election campaign. And Woody said, "Why are you guys scared to be serious?" It was quite a challenge. Why are you guys scared to be serious?
Do you find it ironic that many of his songs, notably This Land Is Your Land, are so popular with all Americans, including people who actually hate his politics?
Let me tell you how that song got to be well known. He wrote it when he was traveling from California to New York at the invitation of Will Geer. He said, "Woody, if you can get here by March, we've got the theater producers to let us use the theater for a midnight benefit concert, and a lot of people will hear you, and you'll get some jobs." And he had to hitchhike. He may have run out of money. He was hitchhiking from Pittsburgh to New York in February, and you can bet his thumb was cold as he stuck it out into the February winds, and the cars going zoo, zoo past him. And he'd go in for a cup of coffee, which cost a nickel in those days, and God Bless America was on all the jukeboxes then. So God Bless America was the way he wrote the song. This land is your land, this land is my land, from California to New York Island. God blessed America for me. And as I was walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway. I saw below me that golden valley. God blessed America for me. That was the first verse. That was the first. I'm sorry, I keep remembering. I'm not remembering it right, so later on I remember. But what I just gave you, that was the first verse of the song. I don't think he had a chorus to the song. He had about 8 verses. Another one of the verses, nobody, oh no. He had the 2 verses I gave you, which they didn't put in the school song. Well, anyway, the record came out for a tiny little record company called Folkways. And some teachers in New York found the kids liked the song, but they didn't put these 2 verses in it that I told you about. This great big sign there that said private property and all. Those 2 verses were not, and the reason is they were 78 RPM records was still the thing, and Little Folkways was still making records by 78 RPM size, and they said, there's not room on the record, so we have to drop some verses, and it's possible the head of Folkways says, maybe those verses will keep the song from getting sung in schools. All we know is that some New York City school teachers found kids loved the song. And a man from a great big publishing company called Silver Burdett, and I think they still do, publish songbooks by the million to sell to American public schools. And I spoke with a man from Silver Burdett. He said, I was in New York and found that kids in New York like the song. Maybe kids around the rest of the country will. So he put that song in the book without those 2 left-wing verses. He didn't even know about the 2 left-wing verses. He just put it as the song was in the 78 RPM record. Well, 20 years later, that song had never been played on the radio. It had never been sold in a single music store, but everybody in America knew it.
Absolutely.
Why? Because the kids took the song home with them. And they were singing it when they got home. Isn't that a great story?
That's fantastic. Let me ask you, you've won so many honors and met so many giants of history, politics, the arts. What would you say honors and personalities stand out the most for you?
Well, I've had some really wonderful honors. The Kennedy Center, way back years ago, and not quite recently from the AFL-CIO for the union songs I used to sing. I still do. You know, I was there when Woody wrote the song, "You Can't Scare Me, I'm sticking to the Union." And on paper, who wouldn't realize what a great song it is? But the rhythm he had by those saying, "Sticking to the," it sings great. I was there in Oklahoma City when the wife of the organizer of a union meeting said, "Woody, all these union songs are about men and brothers this and brothers that. Couldn't you make up a song for the union women?" And the next morning in the union office, he was at a typewriter, and he'd make up a verse and then stand up and sing it and sit down, write another verse. And a year later, I was making an album of union songs with some friends, and one of the songs didn't turn out so well, and they said, "Pete, you got any idea for another union song we can sing instead of that one?" And I said, "Well, he made up a great chorus, but I can't remember any but two of the verses." so we sang the two verses I could remember, and another man went into the next room and made up a third verse, which was not a very good verse. "You gals who want to be free, take a little tip from me. Get to a man who's a union man and join the ladies' auxiliary." And women since then have made up many better third verses. In fact, I mean, Faith Petrick, the head of the San Francisco Folk Music Club, she usually sings about 6 third verses, all made up by women. The one I sing is, "You women who want to be free, take a little tip from me. Break out of that mold we all been sold. You got a fighting history. The fight for women's rights with workers must unite. Like Mother Jones, move them bones to the front of every fight."
I'm sure that one gets an applause from women.
Now, my family is about to have lunch, and they say, "Why are you talking on the phone so long?" Right?
Well, I tell you what, we're not going to keep you from your lunch, Pete. We really appreciate your time with us today. We wish you the best, and hopefully we can do this again soon.
Let me tell you one joke.
No!
One more joke.
No! No!
I got to tell them one joke.
No!
It's one of Woody's best. He was put in a mental hospital with Huntington's disease, and 2 friends came to visit him. They said, "Woody, how are they treating you? Is the food okay?" And Woody said, "Yeah, the food's fine. They're treating me okay. Besides, this is the freest place in America." And his friend said, what do you mean? There's bars on the window." He says, "Here I can jump up on a table and shout, 'I'm a communist.'" And they just say, "Oh, he's crazy." You try doing that anywhere in America. See what happens to you.
Pete, thank you so much for your time with us today.
Well, I think when in my own book I say, would Woody be a communist now? I say, read his books and his songs, and you make up your own mind. I'm sure you'd say, no, he would not.
Well, thank you very much for your time. You better get back to lunch before the women in your own house turn on you.
Exactly.
All right.
Okay, fine.
Thanks again. Take care.
Then I was strolling, the wheat fields waving, the dust clouds rolling, the voice coming chanting, and the fog was lifting. This land was made for you and me.
We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Help get our party back to its roots and to success at the ballot box. Make your contribution to Democrats for America's Future to keep this show on the air and help elect stand-up Democrats. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. Coming up in just a few minutes, Woody Guthrie sang about the economic light left behind by the Dust Bowl. Former Oklahoma Senator Fred Harris talks with us about the political fallout of those times. But right now, we turn to Jim Hightower, America's #1 populist, for his common sense commentary.
Rex Tillerson is known by those who track big oil as T-Rex. As CEO of global giant Exxon, he's the dominant industry predator of scientists and policymakers who call for regulations to restrict fossil fuel emissions that are causing climate change. While T-Rex is the first of the Exxon horribilis species to admit that global warming is a scientific reality, he insists that it's not really a worry because humankind will adapt to this. Rapidly melting polar ice, rising oceans, more ferocious storms, spreading drought, and other catastrophic consequences of climate change are just the price of economic progress, he says. So, government should stay out of Exxon's way and focus instead on making people adapt to the pesky changes wrought by the industry's emissions. Quote, "It's an engineering problem," he explained, and it has engineering solutions. Ironically, on the very day that Rex proclaimed the consequences of climate change to be manageable, Colorado was burning down. Swept by climate-induced wildfires that are the worst in the state's recorded history, people died, families were devastated, and the economic and environmental losses are incalculable. It took nearly 1,300 wildfire fighters from all across America weeks to contain Colorado's blazes, and that was only one of a half-dozen states that were aflame at the same time. We can barely manage the fires we're getting now, much less the six-fold increase expected to come with more global warming. But ExxonMobil lost nothing in the fire, so all is well. And T-Rex has also managed to be unscorched. His $35 million a year paycheck puts him far away from the consequences of Exxon's do-nothing approach to the causes of climate change. This is Jim Hightower saying, Rex Tillerson is getting so rich he could afford to air-condition hell. And I tell you what, I think he'd better start planning that project.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. Fred Harris was a populist when he was the U.S. Senator from Oklahoma. He still is, as a professor at the University of New Mexico. He talks with us about the legacy of Woody Guthrie and the lessons we have learned from the Dust Bowl era of American history. This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly webcast for stand-up Democrats. And joining us now, Fred Harris, professor of political science at the University of New Mexico, well-remembered among Democrats as a senator from his native Oklahoma from 1964 through 1973. And a candidate for the party's nomination for president back in 1976. Senator Harris, thanks for joining us today on americasdemocrats.org.
Yes, sure.
This is the 100th anniversary of the birth, this year is the 100th anniversary of the birth of Woody Guthrie, the great writer and singer of folk music. You're a native of Oklahoma and represented the state in the United States Senate, as I mentioned. What are your thoughts about the man and his music?
Well, of course, he's one of my great heroes, and I used to, when I was campaigning for president, I used to say my theme song is that great anthem written by my fellow Oklahoman Woody Guthrie, "This land is your land." And when I first met many years ago the legendary folk singer and social activist Pete Seeger, he asked me right off, he said, "Do you know where Okemah, Oklahoma is?" I said, "Yes, it's the birthplace of Woody Guthrie." And he said, "Well, you're the first Oklahoman I've run into who knew that." And he pointed out, of course, that there've been people in Oklahoma who didn't like Woody's kind of left-wing views and didn't want to honor him. I went with Arlo Guthrie, who later campaigned for me for president, and Woody Guthrie's widow to Okemah, Oklahoma, where we made we had a little ceremony with marking the birthplace, a little small wooden shack, sort of, and not very impressive, where Woody was born in Okemah. And while we were there, though, the local banker who was with the Chamber of Commerce, I think, in Okemah, attacked us for trying to celebrate the life of Woody Guthrie. He said Woody Guthrie was a communist. Incidentally, I later became close friends with Will Geer, who was grandpa on the Walton's television program. And he used to go with Woody free of charge and give concerts in refugee camps, Okie camps, and so forth in California. And so I asked him about that. I said, "What about this? People say Woody was a communist." He said Woody would not accept the kind of discipline you'd have to take. He wouldn't take anybody's orders in order to be a communist. He was not a communist. Woody was a real American, an enormously talented one, and I'm so pleased that George Kaiser in Tulsa now has bought a big part of his papers and so forth, and is opening a Woody Guthrie museum in Tulsa, Oklahoma. That's a great thing, I think.
Yeah, that's something that seems to have taken much too long to happen to finally get the recognition in his home state. Would you say?
That's absolutely. It's right. It's the right time. They've done two things here lately in Oklahoma that are really good. One was the recognition of Woody Guthrie and the opening or the starting of the Woody Guthrie Museum. The other is they've just elected to the Oklahoma Hall of Fame Elizabeth Warren, who is a Democratic candidate for senator in Massachusetts. She's a former Oklahoman, and that I think is another great step.
And had the Sooners gotten to the national championship, well, gosh, everything would have been perfect in Oklahoma, huh? How did the Dust Bowl affect Oklahoma's political and social culture? Are there lessons from that agricultural and economic disaster that remain applicable today?
Yes, I'd say two things. One, at the time of statehood in Oklahoma, which was 1907, probably if you had a good poll, you'd find that ranked number one were the populists, number two probably were the socialists, three were the Democrats, and four were the Republicans. As you know, things have changed like crazy since then, and one reason is what's happened with the farming. The Dust Bowl, of course, was a steering experience. It seemed like miseries come in pairs or even multitudes, and that's what happened with the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl in Oklahoma. People have asked me, what's happened to Oklahoma? How come it's become so conservative? For example, President Obama did not carry even one of the 77 counties in Oklahoma. And one answer is what's happened to family farming. The other, for example, when I was first getting into statewide politics in Oklahoma, the Farmers Union was very strong. And, for example, it was quite progressive. It was for graduated land tax, and it was for very strong liberal programs. But the Farmers Union more or less disappeared as a political force in Oklahoma as the family farm disappeared or declined drastically. There was a decline of organized labor as well in Oklahoma in recent years, and the rise of big oil and of evangelical Christians' activism and the metropolitan press. And so Oklahoma, even that was beginning when I was first elected to the Senate in 1964. Oklahoma has become increasingly conservative in its politics.
And in fact has voted Republican for president since '68. Did it start with the Dust Bowl migration to California, you think? I mean, was it just kind of a slow build-up from that?
I don't think that that you can tie that together exactly. Of course, my wife very often says, people ask her what happened to Oklahoma, and she says good people like Fred Harris left. I don't agree with that, but a lot of good people were forced out, of course, with the Dust Bowl, Okies going out west. But I think there are other factors that were much more important than just the Dust Bowl and and the Depression. As I said, the rise of big oil, the decline of labor unions, the rise of the activism of evangelical Christians, the metropolitan press, quite conservative. All of those things have conspired to make Oklahoma's voting much more conservative. I think there's still a very strong strain of populism in Oklahoma. I don't doubt it. I go in and out of there quite a bit. But another thing that's been a big problem is this. Up until Howard Dean became the national chairman of the Democratic Party, the Democratic Party nationally had begun to totally ignore states like Oklahoma. And no campaigns were run there. For example, in any presidential campaign until Dean became chairman, if you were here in Oklahoma, for example, here in New Mexico, you would you'd find that there's all sorts of political activity by the Democratic Party and their candidates, and television advertisements and so forth. And if you went just across the line into Oklahoma, you wouldn't even know there was a Democratic campaign going on. They just totally ignored the state. And so it got to the place, and it's very much like that now, that you go down to coffee shop talking, people are just sort of embarrassed to speak up if they're Democrats. And it's become, again, not really socially acceptable in so many places to call yourself a Democrat. I hope we're reversing that now, and the Democrats in Oklahoma are real Democrats. They're progressive Democrats, and so are the leaders of the Democratic Party there now. So maybe things are beginning to change.
We're speaking with Fred Harris, professor of political science at the University of New Mexico, former Democratic senator from the state of Oklahoma. When you were in the Senate and running for president in 1976, you characterized yourself as a new populist. What does that mean in today's era when politics is so polarized?
Well, these Tea Party people, some people try to call them a populist, and there were people who called George Wallace a populist. No, that's certainly not true historically, and it's not true presently. A real populist today is, for example, Jim Hightower of Texas, who was my campaign manager when I ran for president. And what we said and what I said back then as a candidate for president, and what I've written about and still do, is populism is against concentrated economic power and concentrated wealth and income, and is in favor, like the Occupy Wall Street movement, in favor of a fairer distribution of wealth and income and power. And that's what populism means. And the means of achieving a fair distribution of wealth and income and power are really quite traditional things. That is a progressive income tax, and ours has certainly gotten out of whack, and programs that particularly benefit the middle class. This is important, doing something about that, rectifying that terrible maldistribution of wealth and income which exists in the United States today, as bad as places like Mexico, for example. Doing something about that, remedying that situation, requires action that will rebuild a middle class. And that's important not just for fairness, but it's really difficult, I think, to have a true democracy without a strong middle class. And ours has been under great pressure in recent times.
Fred Harris, professor of political science at the University of New Mexico, of course, Senate Democrat from his native Oklahoma from 64 to 73, a candidate for the party's nomination for president in 1976. Senator Harris, as always, we appreciate your time with us today on americasdemocrats.org and hope we can talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly webcast for stand-up Democrats. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Help get our party back to its roots and to success at the ballot box. Make your contribution to Democrats for America's Future to keep this show on the air and help elect stand-up Democrats. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. And now Bill Press talks with the leader of the Nuns on a Bus movement of progressive Catholics who point out the immorality of the Republicans' proposed budget.
This is the Full Court Press, the Bill Press Show, live on your radio and on Current TV.
8:33 minutes after the hour, millions and millions and millions, it seems, following us on Twitter. You can too, at BP Show. That's our handle, right, Peter? Got it right?
Yes, sir.
At BP Show. Welcome back, everybody. One of the most exciting events of the summer, and one of the events that's gotten the most media attention, was the recent, just ended last Monday, a tour of the Nuns on the Bus. Yes, they are back, led by Sister Simone Campbell, who's in the studio with us again this hour. She was here just before taking off on the bus tour, and she wrapped it up on Monday, and she's back in studio to tell us all about it. Sister Simone Campbell's head of the network and a sister of social service. Social
Justice
service.
too, but
Justice too, right. Hey, sister, nice to see you.
Great to see you, Bill.
Thank you for coming. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You got a lot of news out there, a lot of attention. What kind of response? So you went to 9 states,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
You said some 31 different
We think
communities?
31 different communities. We had stops in, and then all along the way, we met people who were so hungry for an alternative message. It was, I'm not exactly sure what we touched in this nation, but it was a hunger for another way forward. And it was a joy to be a part of this, but it was also heartbreak because so many stories of people struggling, people left out, people unseen. And yet the joy of being community together was quite a wonderful, uplifting
So what
event.
struck you the most about the people you talked to?
What struck me the most? Their responsibility, their struggle, their engagement, they're trying to support family, and how so easily they get dismissed in political sound bites. They get unseen. For instance, in Milwaukee, we met Billy, who touched my heart deeply. He and his wife had decided to move from Chicago to Milwaukee to take care of their kids better, to get the kids out of some of the inner city stuff. Mm-hmm. He had a job. His job transferred him. But then once he got there, then the job cut back. And so they only had enough money to either put a roof over their head or food on the table. And he was working hard and trying to work additional jobs. So what they decided to do was they decided that the roof was more important so their kids could stay in the same school. And every night they went to St. Benedict's dining room for dinner. In order to live as a family. And it brought home to me how these programs that we think of as some charity, some generosity on those of us that are able to eat and have a roof every night, that this is about really caring for our nation, and the fact that wages have stayed flat, and the fact that businesses benefit from these very programs that serve their employees. Because if Billy can't eat, if he can't feed his family, he can't work. I mean, you can't work hungry. So I realized a whole new interdependence in our society. And Billy I'll always carry with me.
And your focus when you went out there, as we talked before you left, was to let people know the very painful impacts of the House Republican budget authored
Absolutely.
by Paul Ryan, if it passed, in terms of programs designed to help the poor.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So did you find that people know about what's coming or know about what they're doing, and what kind of response did you get?
We found over and over people didn't have a clue about what was coming. They just hear the sound bites. Oh, this is good for our nation. We need to do it for our nation. That's why we have to do it. So people are really worried about our nation, as we all are. But they have no idea of the way it's being structured in the House Republican budget. I mean, Paul Ryan is really misguided in saying that more money should go to the wealthy because they make jobs. We haven't seen the jobs, and we haven't seen salary increases. So that's the wrong place to put money. Where money's needed is with those folks that are struggling so hard at the margins, where there's pent-up demand. I mean, that's free market theory. So let's put money where people need it. And that's in salaries, that's in keeping these important programs. People don't have a clue that's coming down the road. Wow. They don't know that.
Yeah, and yet in the budget, every one of those programs that they may be depending on or may come to depend on would be disastrously cut.
Absolutely. Under the guise of taking care of the deficit, which it doesn't do. But the real thing is to know what people really don't know is that much of the work of Catholic sisters in these social service agencies is a public-private partnership. Catholic sisters take contract with the government to provide services, and then they leverage it, so they get matching grants from the private sector, they get individual donations, and then, as I say, we squeeze every nickel, every penny to get maximum worth out of it. So we have responsible programs, but these responsible programs are going to be devastated. And over, we were up in Philly and we saw this fantastic community center that the community helped plan. They took an old warehouse, loading docks, and they made a place of beauty. It is exquisite. And the service they provide, everything from a Head Start program all the way up to senior respite care for, seniors with Alzheimer's, and where they do cognitive stimulation as well as, just kind of socialized stuff. All of those programs are going to be devastated if this Ryan budget goes through.
So what happens now? You've been on the road. You went to all these meetings. You spread the message. You got a great response. You can't drop it there.
Oh, no. It's abundantly clear that we have to keep going, that the momentum's there, that there's a hunger there. Now, I have to tell you, I have to take many naps this weekend and do my laundry. I haven't done my laundry yet. But then what we're going to do is do a brief evaluation and then next steps. Next steps we see so far is doing a magazine of Connection, which is going to be all about the bus trip. Mm-hmm. We also want to do a briefing on Capitol Hill. Where we can tell these stories. We know there's enough data on Capitol Hill. What we need to do is to break people's hearts with the stories of the folks we met. Because unless you have a broken heart for the sake of our nation, change isn't going to happen. We have to break out of the walnut of these sound bites. I mean, it's just really hard-shelled sound bites, and let the nation flourish.
So you were visiting a lot of facilities where nuns, your fellow sisters, right?
Yes. We usually call ourselves sisters, but
your sisters are doing such great work around the country, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Did any of the boys come along? Boys, I mean priests or bishops?
Oh, we had...
To support you?
Yes. We started off the first day in Des Moines, kind of accidentally, because the sisters heard we were flying to Des Moines, because we had to go there to get to Ames. I didn't know that.
Oh.
So the sister said, well, you can't just sneak into town. We've got to have a prayer blessing. So they organized this big event and we did it at Holy Trinity Church in Des Moines. Father Mike, the pastor, welcomed us. Not only did he welcome us, but he made these big signs and got the parishioners to meet us at the airport. So there was a lovely welcome. I got the opportunity to meet Bishop Pates, who's the Bishop of Des Moines, who co-signed the letter with Bishop Blair from Stockton, saying that the Ryan budget was an immoral document and calling for a responsible document. So I got to meet him and thank him for his leadership. There were several bishops on the way wished they could be there or expressed interest and concern. The fact is we planned this thing so fast. It came up so fast that I totally understood that their schedules made it difficult. But we did have priests every place, and the biggest priest reception was in Pittsburgh. It was they made a concerted effort to turn out and welcome us. It was awesome.
So you didn't hear from the Vatican saying, why aren't you in Washington talking about same-sex marriage?
No. I've never heard from the Vatican, probably won't. So I'm way down on the list of folks to go after, I guess, except we did get mentioned by them. I think
but some of your sisters have been mentioned.
Oh, some of ours. Yeah.
By the Vatican, and there's an investigation underway, as we talked about. And while you were on the bus, I think, there's a new head of the investigation in the Vatican.
Right.
I don't follow Vatican politics that closely, but there's a new guy in charge. So some of them at the Vatican, some at least, think that you girls, the sisters, are just stirring things up and up to no good and not talking about what you're supposed to be talking about, which is same-sex and abortion. Damn it.
Pardon the language, of course. But
Bill, good grief. You have a nun in studio with you. Why would you say that?
The thing
He's never heard it before.
Yeah, right. I'm shocked. The thing is that we can't be silent in the face of the gospel. I mean, every morning we prayed together as sisters on the bus, and it was probably one of the most important parts of nourishment for us, because to be open to the gospel, and over we found Jesus among the people that we met. You have to stand where people are. Jesus said, "Blessed are the poor." All right, that's where we stood. And it's going to make people uncomfortable. I mean, I think I said this before, that historically, sisters have always made bishops uncomfortable. And quite candidly, historically, bishops have always made sisters uncomfortable. So it's our role, it's part of our mission to make each other uncomfortable, because that's where the edge of conversion is. And Jesus always calls us to conversion, to some deeper truth.
What is the great phrase about our mission is not to...
it's not to be... Well, there's a couple of those. One is Mother Teresa. Our mission is not to be successful, but it's to be faithful. And then the other one is that we're supposed to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable.
And afflict the comfortable, right?
Yeah.
Wait,
my favorite part.
Nobody does it better than Sister Simone Campbell. It's a whole new, level of activity and focus and energy on the part of sisters in America. I love it. And we'll continue with Sister Simone Campbell when we come back here on the Full Court Press.
Heard around the country and seen on current TV. This is the Bill Press Show.
Hey, how about it? 13 minutes now before the top of the hour. Neil King from the Wall Street Journal here is a friend of Bill. In the next hour, we'll be joined by Congressman Tim Ryan from Ohio. Speaking of Ohio, she's just back from Ohio. Sister Simone Campbell in studio with us, of Nuns on the Bus fame. The Nuns on the Bus trip was so successful that President Obama said, I think I might try that myself. And he takes off on his own little bus tour today, by the way, through parts of Ohio. And he might even be going to you were in Youngstown, Ohio, right?
Yes, we were.
Yeah.
Yes. Which is Congressman Tim Ryan's district. So,
yes, indeed.
We had this amazing reception. The Sisters of the Humility of Mary, as well as the Ursulines of Youngstown, went together to welcome us to this amazing shelter that they have created. But the best part was the Ursuline sisters had been on retreat all together they do an 8-day retreat, and they had reflected on the House budget the day before as in light of Scripture. And they had done this whole reflection. Then in the evening, they did a response to that, and they all made signs. And so when we drove into town, they lined the street with their signs about welcoming us and then response to the Ryan budget. I have to tell you, tears sprang to my eyes. It was such an amazing welcome. So they went like 3 blocks, 3 blocks, everybody there with the pictures. It was, with their signs. Yeah. And it was just, it was such a moving welcome. It was amazing.
So let me ask you, is this, there's all this talk about the role of religion in politics, right? Mm-hmm. Is this a proper role for religious leaders to get involved in a political fight over a budget?
My gosh, yes.
And to take sides? And why?
Well, because it's a moral document. The budget sets out where we are really acting on behalf of our nation. It's the choices we make. And if we make immoral choices, then of course people of faith need to speak out. Our immoral choices are that we prefer the wealthy over those who are in need, that we are not having each other's backs, that we aren't supporting community. I've come to realize that it is an unpatriotic lie that we are individuals and we do it on our own. That's a lie. We do not do this on our own. Those who have wealth depend on this whole network of support to create their wealth. They depend on their workers. They depend on the infrastructure. They depend on government. They depend on the courts. They depend on this whole massive web of society. It is a lie that they have done it on their own. And it is a lie that we can do this on our own. We need each other.
So Congressman Paul Ryan, the author of this budget, is a Catholic. Yep. So what did he do, fall asleep in Sunday school? Or?
Unfortunately, I know some of the sisters who taught him, and I'm saying, what happened? What happened? But what's interesting with Congressman Ryan is that he's now saying practically the same things about Catholic social teaching that he said about Ayn Rand last year or 18 months ago. And so I'm really wondering if I wonder how much it's political opportunism and how much it is actually what he has studied. So my idea is if I get a chance to visit him, I'm going to take him a copy of Pope Benedict's encyclical, the letter that he wrote, Charity and Truth. It's all about what our society is supposed to be about and what kind of responsibility corporations and individuals have to each other and to the whole society. And then I say, I don't know if this will happen, but I'll give him a pop quiz in a couple of weeks to see if he actually read it.
But you might take him a copy of the New Testament, too, sister, while you're at it.
There's a thought. Mm-hmm.
James is calling from Cincinnati, Ohio. A big Ohio day here on the Full Court Press. Hi, James.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
And also the sister. I appreciate her and everything she's doing.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, I called to say this, that for some reason, ever since President Obama came into office, it seems like to me that what he's trying to do for the people is almost exactly what Jesus taught, and so I consider Jesus the first progressive or the first Democrat, and that's my comment.
All right,
I listen for your response.
All right, James. Okay, appreciate hearing from you this morning.
Yes, sir.
Right, thank you. That is, there have been books written about. I forget the name of the pastor now who wrote a book about Jesus as the first liberal.
Yes. Well, I think...
But certainly there is a message, a clear message in the New Testament about what should be the focus of Christian social justice, right?
Absolutely. It's not just New Testament. I mean, also look at the Hebrew scriptures, look at the Torah, look at the Buddhist scriptures. I mean, all faiths say that that the measure of who we are as a people is who do we care about. You know, how are we inclusive? How do we care for the broader community? We are a bigger body than just our individual selves.
Sister Simone Campbell, I admire you so much. Thank you so much for coming in. And thanks for being out there on the road, and Nuns on the bus. And I know this is just the beginning of a movement.
Absolutely. More steps to come.
Exactly. And you'll come back and tell us all about those once you've got everything in order.
Sounds good. Love to do it.
Consider this a stop on your bus tour anytime. All right.
Thank you so much,
sister.
Bill.
Great to see you. It's the network. I should mention that again.
Networklobby.org.
Networklobby.org, right?
That's it. That's how to find us.
Okay. And she's a sister of social service.
That's all for americasdemocrats.org. Thank you to all who made today's show possible. Pete Seeger, Fred Harris, and the entire Bill Press team. And thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, please get involved in our efforts to keep this show going and to elect Democrats who are bringing the party back to its roots. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. And be sure to find 21st Century Democrats on Facebook. For americasdemocrats.org, I'm your host, Jim Cuddy. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Join us, support the show, and help elect Democrats who will stand up for democratic principles with your contribution today.